War Commander Vexthon stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the scanner readings with satisfaction. His yellow eyes gleamed as he studied the display showing a single human ship moving slowly through the Helix Nebula. The vessel appeared to be badly damaged, with flickering energy readings and erratic movement patterns. "Perfect," he hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air. The Zephyrian fleet had been hunting human ships for 3 months now, and this looked like the easiest prey they had found yet. The human ship was identified as the UES Defiance, a heavy cruiser that should normally be a formidable opponent, but the scanner readings told a different story. The ship's shields were weak and unstable. Its engines were barely functioning, leaving trails of plasma behind as it limped through space. Even its weapon systems showed significant power fluctuations. War Commander, his second-in-command Sub-Commander Crix, approached with excitement. "Our intelligence confirms this vessel was recently engaged in battle with the Thorian pirates near the Outer Rim. They must have barely escaped." Vexthon nodded, his scaled lips curling into what passed for a smile among his species. The Zephyrians had been studying human combat patterns for months. They knew humans typically fought with desperate courage when cornered, but they also knew that damaged ships rarely had the power to mount effective resistance. "Deploy the hunting formation," Vexthon ordered. "Signal all ships to emerge from the nebula shadows on my command." The Zephyrian hunting fleet was perfectly designed for this kind of operation. 12 hunter-killer ships, each one sleek and deadly, equipped with the latest weapons technology. They had been hiding in the dense radiation clouds of the Helix Nebula, using the natural interference to mask their energy signatures from human sensors. Vexthon had planned this ambush carefully. The Helix Nebula was a known shipping route for human vessels traveling between their colonies. The radiation made it an ideal hunting ground, as it limited sensor range and provided perfect cover for predators like his fleet. "All ships report ready." "War Commander," Crix announced. "Execute," Vexthon commanded, one by one. The Zephyrian ships emerged from the swirling gases of the nebula. They moved with practiced precision, forming a perfect encirclement around the human cruiser. The trap was flawless. 12 ships surrounding one damaged vessel with no escape route. The human ship immediately detected them as expected. Vexthon watched as the Defiance attempted to increase speed, but its damaged engines could only manage a pathetic acceleration. The ship began broadcasting standard distress signals calling for help that would never come in time. "They are trying to run," Crix observed with amusement. "Shall we disable their engines completely?" "Not yet," Vexthon replied. "Let them exhaust themselves first. Fear makes humans easier to capture alive, and live specimens are worth more to our research division." The Zephyrians had learned much about human psychology through their previous raids. Humans rarely surrendered easily, but when faced with overwhelming odds and no hope of escape, they sometimes made the practical choice. Vexthon hoped this would be one of those times. Suddenly, an unexpected transmission came from the human ship. Instead of surrender or desperate pleas for mercy, they heard a calm female voice speaking in accented Galactic Standard. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Defiance. We thank you for making this easier for us. Would you like to surrender now? Or should we proceed with the original plan?" The bridge of Vexthon's flagship fell silent. His officers looked at each other in confusion. Making it easier? What could the human possibly mean? "War Commander," Crix whispered. "Perhaps their ship's damage has affected their communication systems? They may not understand their situation." Vexthon studied the scanner readings again. The human ship was definitely damaged. Their readings showed weak shields, failing engines, and limited weapon power. There was no way this single vessel could threaten his entire fleet. "Human Captain," Vexthon broadcast back, deciding to enjoy this moment of human delusion. "You are surrounded by 12 warships of the Zephyrian hunting fleet. Your vessel is damaged and outnumbered. Surrender immediately and you will be treated according to galactic warfare conventions." There was a pause before the human captain responded. When she did, there was something in her voice that made Vexthon's scales prickle with unease. It sounded almost amused. "War Commander Vexthon, I presume. Your reputation precedes you. We've been looking forward to this meeting for quite some time. Are you certain you don't want to surrender?" "Last chance, how did she know his name?" Vexthon felt the first stirring of doubt, but he pushed it aside. Humans were known for their bizarre sense of humor, even in hopeless situations. It was probably just another example of their strange psychology. "Move in," he ordered his fleet. All ships advanced to capture positions. "Disable their weapons and engines, but try to keep the ship intact. We want their technology and crew." The Zephyrian ships began closing the distance, their weapons charging and targeting systems locking onto the human vessel. This was the moment Vexthan had been waiting for. Another successful hunt that would add to his reputation and provide valuable intelligence about human capabilities. The human ship made no attempt to flee. Instead, it simply waited in space, almost as if it was inviting the attack. This struck Vexthan as odd, but he attributed it to resignation or perhaps a malfunction in their navigation systems. "Target their engine compartments first," Vexthan instructed. "Then their weapon systems. I want that ship disabled but salvageable." His weapons officer began inputting the firing solutions, but before he could fire, something impossible happened. The human ship's scanner readings suddenly changed. The flickering shield snapped to full power in an instant. The failing engines roared to life, showing energy output levels that exceeded the ship's supposed maximum capacity. The weapon systems that had appeared damaged now showed full operational status. "What?" Vexthan began, but he never finished the sentence. Captain Vasquez's voice came over the communication channel again, but this time it was accompanied by something that made every Zephyrian on the bridge freeze in terror. A new signal appeared on their scanners. No, multiple signals. "Big ones. Attention, Zephyrian hunting fleet," the human captain said calmly. "This is your final warning. Stand down immediately or face the consequences. You have 10 seconds to comply." Vexthan stared at his scanner display in growing horror. Ships were appearing everywhere around his fleet. Massive ships that dwarfed his hunter-killers, a carrier, destroyers, frigates, an entire human battle group materializing from what had appeared to be empty space. "Impossible," he whispered. "They were not there. Our sensors would have detected them." But the evidence was right in front of him. His perfect trap had become something else entirely. The hunters had become the hunted, and Vexthan realized with dawning terror that they had walked straight into an ambush that made his own look like a child's game. The human captain's countdown reached 0, and the space around the Helix Nebula erupted into chaos. The space around the Helix Nebula transformed in seconds, where moments before there had been only swirling gas clouds and Vexthan's hunting fleet. Now a massive human battle group dominated the area. The carrier UES Retribution emerged first, its bulk casting shadows across the smaller ships. 3 destroyers followed, their sleek forms bristling with weapon arrays. Finally, a squadron of stealth frigates appeared, seeming to materialize from nothing. Vexthan's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The scanner readings made no sense. These ships had been completely invisible until now, hidden by technology that surpassed anything in Zephyrian databases. "How?" Sub-Commander Crix gasped beside him. "Our sensors showed nothing. The nebula's radiation should make stealth impossible." Captain Vasquez's voice filled their bridge again, calm and professional. "War Commander Vexthan, you are now surrounded by the 5th Human Battle Group. Your ships are outnumbered and outgunned. This is your final opportunity to surrender." Vexthan's training took over, pushing aside his shock. He was a veteran commander who had survived dozens of battles. Even if this was a trap, he still had 12 warships against what appeared to be 7 human vessels. The odds were not as favorable as before, but they were not impossible. "All ships," he broadcast to his fleet. "Attack Formation Delta. Focus fire on the carrier first, then the destroyers. We can still win this." But as his ships began to move, something else happened that made his blood run cold. The damaged human cruiser that had been their original target suddenly dropped all pretense. The flickering shield stabilized into an energy barrier that registered higher than anything Vexthan had ever seen. The limping engines now showed power output that exceeded his flagship's capabilities. "Holographic camouflage disengaged," announced a human voice over the communication channel. "All ships weapons free. Holographic camouflage." The humans had made their perfectly functional warship appear damaged, using technology that the Zephyrians did not even know existed. The entire distress scenario had been false, designed to lure his fleet into this exact position. The first human weapons fired before Vexthan could give proper orders to his fleet. But these were not the standard plasma cannons or missile systems his intelligence reports had described. The destroyer UES Vigilant launched something that looked like a swarm of metallic insects. Hundreds of small objects separated from the ship and began moving toward the Zephyrian vessels. "What are those?" Crix demanded, watching the scanner display in confusion. The answer came when the first wave of objects reached the Zephyrian hunter-killer Talon's edge. Instead of exploding on impact, the small devices attached themselves to the ship's hull and began cutting through the armor with focused energy beams. Within seconds, they had created dozens of hull breaches. "Adaptive combat drones," Captain Vasquez explained helpfully over the open channel. "They analyze your armor composition and adjust their cutting frequency accordingly. Very effective against shields too, once they adapt to your specific energy patterns." The Talon's edge was already listing badly, its hull compromised in multiple locations. Its captain tried to target the drones with point defense weapons, but there were too many of them, and they moved in unpredictable patterns that seemed to learn from each defensive response. Vex then watched in horror as his perfectly disciplined fleet began to fall apart. The human battle group moved with a coordination that spoke of extensive training and advanced communication systems. Every human ship seemed to know exactly what the others were doing, creating a seamless flow of attack patterns that left no gaps for the Zephyrians to exploit. "Sir, incoming transmission from Captain Morth of the Night Striker," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," Vexthon ordered. Captain Morth's voice was strained with panic. "War Commander, these humans are using weapons we have never encountered. They are jamming our targeting systems with some kind of electronic interference that adapts to our frequencies. My gunners cannot lock onto their ships." Before Vexthon could respond, another voice cut across the channel, but this voice was speaking perfect Zephyrian, with the correct accent and military terminology. "Night Striker, this is Fleet Command. You are ordered to break formation and retreat to coordinate 77 Alpha. Vexthon felt ice in his veins. Those were not his orders, and Fleet Command was nowhere near this sector. Someone else was giving orders to his ships in his own language. "Disregard that transmission," he broadcast quickly. "All ships maintain current positions." But the damage was already done. 3 of his ships had begun following the false orders before his correction reached them. The human electronic warfare specialists were not just jamming Zephyrian communications, they were actively infiltrating them. The carrier Retribution launched its fighter squadrons, and Vexthon saw immediately that these were unlike any human fighters his intelligence had described. They moved with impossible agility, their engines producing no visible exhaust and making direction changes that should have been fatal to any living pilot inside. "Drone fighters," he realized aloud. The humans are using artificial intelligence to pilot their attack craft. The drone fighters swarmed over his fleet like angry insects. They were too small and fast for the heavy weapons of his hunter-killers to target effectively, but their own weapons were devastatingly accurate. Each fighter seemed to know exactly where to hit each Zephyrian ship for maximum damage. "War Commander," Crix reported, his voice shaking. "We are losing the Void Hunter and the Star Piercer. Their engines are offline and they have multiple hull breaches." Vexthon looked at his tactical display and saw the truth he had been trying to avoid. This was not a battle, it was a demonstration. The humans were systematically dismantling his fleet with technology and tactics that seemed decades ahead of anything the Zephyrians possessed. But the worst realization was yet to come. As he watched the human ships maneuver, he began to recognize their attack patterns. The way they split his formation, the precise timing of their electronic warfare, the coordination between different ship types. It was all based on standard Zephyrian tactical doctrine. They knew exactly how his fleet would respond to each attack because they had studied Zephyrian warfare extensively. Every move his ships made seemed to be anticipated and countered before it could be effective. "Captain Vasquez," he broadcast, abandoning all pretense of military formality. "How long have you been watching us?" Her response was immediate and chilling. "War Commander, we have been tracking your hunting patterns for 2 months. Every raid, every attack, every tactical decision. We have detailed records of all of it. You have been very educational. The humans had been studying his fleet like laboratory animals, learning their behavior patterns and developing countermeasures for every Zephyrian tactic. As another of his ships fell to the coordinated human assault, Vexthon realized that his hunting fleet had been the prey all along. The humans had simply been patient enough to let their subjects think they were the predators, while gathering the information they needed to set this perfect trap. The hunter had indeed become the hunted, but it had happened long before today's battle. It had been happening every time he thought he was winning. The battle continued to unfold in ways that defied everything Vexton thought he knew about human capabilities. His fleet of 12 hunter-killers was being systematically destroyed by 7 human ships using tactics and technology that seemed impossible. The stealth frigates were the most disturbing element of the human force. They appeared and disappeared from his sensors at will, striking with weapons that Vexton had never seen before. One frigate, the UES Ghostwalker, fired what looked like ordinary missiles at his ship Claw of Vengeance. But these missiles did something unprecedented. They passed straight through the ship's shields as if the energy barriers did not exist. How can projectiles phase through shields? Subcommander Crix demanded, watching the tactical display in disbelief. The answer came when the missiles struck the Claw of Vengeance's hull and detonated. The explosions were contained within the ship's armor, causing massive internal damage while leaving the exterior relatively intact. It was surgical destruction that disabled the vessel without completely destroying it. Quantum torpedoes, Captain Vasquez explained over the open channel, as if she were conducting a classroom lesson. They exist in a phase-shifted state that allows them to pass through conventional energy shields. The technology is still experimental, but quite effective against ships that rely heavily on shield-based defense. Vexton felt a chill as he realized the implications. The humans were using his fleet as a testing ground for experimental weapons. They were not just winning a battle, they were conducting a field test of new military technology. The destroyer UES Thunderstrike demonstrated another terrifying aspect of human warfare. When the Zephyrian ship Razor Wind attempted to close to weapons range, the destroyer released clouds of metallic particles that quickly formed a defensive barrier around the human vessel. The Zephyrian plasma bolts struck the particle cloud and were absorbed harmlessly. Adaptive defensive matrix, announced the Thunderstrike's captain over the communication channel. The particles analyze incoming energy signatures and adjust their absorption properties in real time. Your plasma weapons are now ineffective against this ship. But the particle cloud did more than defend. As Vexton watched in horror, portions of the cloud detached and moved toward the Razor Wind like a living thing. When the particles made contact with the Zephyrian ship, they began eating through the hull plating with incredible speed. Nanofabricators, Crix identified, his voice barely a whisper. They are consuming our ship's materials and using them to create more of themselves. The Razor Wind's captain tried everything: emergency maneuvers, point defense fire, even ramming speed toward the human destroyer. Nothing worked. The nanofabricators spread across his ship's hull like a disease, systematically dismantling the vessel from the outside in. Vexton turned his attention to his own ship's weapons, hoping to at least damage one human vessel before his fleet was completely destroyed. But when he tried to target the carrier Retribution, his weapons officer reported a problem. War Commander, our targeting computers are malfunctioning. They cannot maintain a lock on any human vessel for more than 2 seconds at a time. Manual targeting then, Vexton ordered. Sir, manual targeting is also failing. The human ships appear to be using some form of sensor jamming that creates false images. I am seeing multiple copies of each vessel and I cannot determine which are real. This was electronic warfare beyond anything in Zephyrian experience. The humans were not just jamming their sensors. They were feeding false information directly into Zephyrian targeting systems, creating ghost images that made accurate fire impossible. Even worse, Vexton's own communication system continued to receive false orders in perfect Zephyrian military language. The humans had not just learned his language, they had mastered military terminology, command protocols, and even the specific dialect used by his home fleet. All ships, execute emergency scatter pattern 9, came a voice that sounded exactly like Vexton's own. I did not give that order, he broadcast quickly, but 3 more of his ships had already begun following the false command before his correction reached them. The human electronic warfare was like fighting an enemy that could read his mind and speak with his voice. Every command he gave was anticipated, and false orders were inserted into his communication network with perfect timing to create maximum confusion. The fighting itself showcased human tactical thinking that was completely different from Zephyrian doctrine. Where his people relied on individual ship superiority and aggressive assault tactics, the humans fought like a single organism with many parts. The carrier Retribution never fired its main weapons directly. Instead, it coordinated the attacks of all other ships in the battle group, ensuring that no Zephyrian vessel faced fewer than 3 human ships at once. When the Zephyrians tried to concentrate their fire on single targets, the human formation would shift, presenting new threats from unexpected angles. The destroyers worked in perfect coordination with the stealth frigates. When a frigate disabled a Zephyrian ship's shields, a destroyer would immediately follow up with precision strikes on specific systems. When a destroyer drew enemy fire, frigates would appear behind the attacking ship and disable its engines. Most disturbing of all was the way the humans seemed to predict every Zephyrian tactical response. When Captain Thex of the Bloodfang attempted to ram the human destroyer Vigilant, the human ship moved aside at exactly the right moment, allowing the Zephyrian vessel to pass harmlessly by. But as the Bloodfang overshot its target, 3 human fighters attached magnetic charges to its hull and detonated them simultaneously, crippling the ship's life support systems. They knew what we would do before we did it, Vexthon said aloud, the reality finally sinking in. War Commander, Crix replied quietly, I think they have been studying us for much longer than 2 months. As if responding to his comment, Captain Vasquez's voice filled their bridge again. War Commander Vexthon, you are correct to suspect extensive study. We have detailed behavioral profiles for you and each of your ship captains. We know that Captain Thex favors ramming attacks when cornered. We know that Captain Morth will always try to retreat to high ground. We know that you prefer to sacrifice smaller ships to save your flagship. The accuracy of these assessments was terrifying. Vasquez was describing tactical preferences that Vexthon had not even realized he possessed. The humans had been watching his fleet so closely that they understood Zephyrian psychology better than the Zephyrians understood themselves. How many of our raids did you observe? Vexthon asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. All of them, came the immediate reply. Every attack on human colonies, every merchant ship raid, every tactical maneuver your fleet has made in the past 4 months. We have been tracking you since your first incursion into human space. 4 months. The humans had been studying his fleet for 4 months, learning their patterns, developing countermeasures, and planning this moment. Every victory Vexthon thought he had achieved had actually been a lesson for his enemies. With 8 of his 12 ships either destroyed or disabled, Vexthon faced the reality that his hunting fleet was finished. The humans had not just defeated them, they had done it with surgical precision that left no doubt about the vast difference in capability between the two forces. But Vexthon was still a Zephyrian warrior, and his species did not surrender easily. If he was going to die, he would take some humans with him. All remaining ships, he broadcast to his surviving vessels. Prepare for ramming speed. We will sell our lives dearly. This was the final gambit in Zephyrian tactical doctrine. When defeat was certain, transform your ships into weapons and take as many enemies as possible with you to death. It was considered the most honorable way for a warrior to die. The 4 surviving Zephyrian ships, his flagship Stellar Fang, plus the Night Striker, Voidclaw, and Death's Edge, all began accelerating toward the human battle group. Their engines strained to maximum output as they aimed for the largest targets they could reach. For a moment, Vexthon felt a surge of hope. The human ships seemed surprised by this tactic. They began evasive maneuvers, but 4 ships accelerating on suicide runs were difficult to avoid entirely. At least 1 human vessel would be destroyed. But then Captain Vasquez's voice returned, and there was something in her tone that made Vexthon's hearts sink. Ramming attack, pattern 3, she announced calmly. Execute countermeasure 7. The human ships moved in perfect coordination, as if this exact scenario had been practiced many times. But instead of simply trying to avoid the ramming ships, they did something that defied all logic. The destroyer Thunderstrike positioned itself directly in the path of the Night Striker's ramming attack. For a moment it looked like Captain Morth would achieve his goal of taking a human ship with him, but at the last second, the Thunderstrike released another cloud of those metallic particles. The Night Striker hit the particle cloud at full speed and simply stopped. Not slowed down, not deflected, stopped completely, as if it had hit a solid wall. The ship's forward momentum was absorbed by the particle field, leaving it hanging motionless in space. Inertial dampening field, Vasquez explained. The particles create a localized area where kinetic energy is converted directly to heat and dissipated. Your ship is now completely motionless relative to our destroyer. The same thing happened to the other ramming ships. Each human vessel released particle clouds that absorbed the kinetic energy of the attacking Zephyrians, leaving them dead in space and completely helpless. Vex then stared at his tactical display in numb disbelief. Even their final desperate attack had been anticipated and countered with technology that seemed like magic. The humans had not just defeated his tactical decisions, they had made them irrelevant. "War Commander," Sub-Commander Crix reported quietly, "we are receiving targeting locks from all human vessels. They could destroy us at any moment." But the humans did not fire. Instead, Captain Vasquez opened a communication channel directly to Vexithon's ship. "War Commander, this is your final opportunity to surrender. We have disabled your entire fleet without loss of life on either side. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to galactic warfare conventions." Vexithon looked around his bridge at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. These were proud Zephyrian warriors who had never known defeat. But they were also practical beings who could recognize when continuing to fight was pointless. "How?" he asked Captain Vasquez. "How did you know every move we would make?" "War Commander, humans have a saying, know your enemy. We have been studying your species' military tactics for months. We know how Zephyrians think, how you fight, how you react under pressure. We predicted your ramming attack because it is the standard response for Zephyrian commanders in your tactical position." "But the technology," Vexthon persisted. "The quantum torpedoes, the nanofabricators, the inertial dampening fields, our intelligence report said humans possess none of these weapons." There was a pause before Vasquez responded, and when she did, her voice carried a note of something that sounded almost like sympathy. "War Commander, your intelligence reports were accurate. We did not possess these weapons until recently. We developed them specifically to counter Zephyrian tactics after studying your previous raids." The implications of this statement hit Vexthan like a physical blow. The humans had not defeated his fleet using existing technology. They had invented new weapons and tactics specifically designed to counter everything the Zephyrians could do. "How long did it take you to develop these countermeasures?" he asked. 6 weeks, came the immediate reply. "Once we understood your tactical patterns, our research teams worked around the clock to develop appropriate responses. Human military doctrine emphasizes rapid adaptation to new threats." 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, the humans had gone from being raided by his fleet to developing an entire arsenal of weapons, specifically designed to make Zephyrian tactics obsolete. "This is impossible," Crix whispered. "No species can develop new military technology that quickly." "Sub-Commander," Vasquez's voice carried clearly to the Zephyrian bridge. "Humans excel at rapid problem-solving under pressure. When faced with a new threat, we do not simply respond with existing capabilities. We create new capabilities specifically designed to address that threat." Vexthon felt something he had never experienced before in combat: complete and utter helplessness. His fleet had not just been defeated, it had been rendered obsolete by an enemy that treated warfare like a science project. "We surrender," he said finally, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "Acknowledged, War Commander. Please power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded. Medical teams are standing by to assist with your wounded." As Vexthon gave the orders to surrender, he noticed something that added insult to injury. Scanner. Readings showed human ships broadcasting the entire battle on multiple frequencies. The complete destruction of his hunting fleet was being transmitted across the sector for anyone to witness. "Why are you broadcasting this?" he asked. "Educational purposes," Captain Vasquez replied. "Other species should understand what happens when they threaten human colonies. Consider it a public service announcement." The humans were not just defeating their enemies, they were making sure everyone knew about it. The complete humiliation of the Zephyrian hunting fleet would be watched by every military commander in the sector. As human boarding parties prepared to take control of his ships, Vex then realized that this battle would mark the end of more than just his fleet. It would be the end of any species' willingness to test human military capabilities. The humans had just demonstrated that they could analyze any enemy, develop specific countermeasures, and implement them with terrifying efficiency. Any species that attacked humans would not just face their existing military, they would face new weapons designed specifically to defeat them. Vexton had thought he was hunting prey. Instead, he had awakened something far more dangerous than he could have imagined. News of the Helix Nebula incident spread through galactic communication networks, faster than any military intelligence service could contain it. The complete destruction of War Commander Vexthon's hunting fleet, broadcast live across multiple frequencies, reached every corner of civilized space within days. On the Thraxian homeworld, High Admiral Zecht watched the recorded battle footage for the third time, his mandibles clicking nervously. The Thraxians had been considering military action against human expansion into what they considered their territory. After seeing how easily the humans had dismantled 12 Zephyrian warships, those plans were quietly shelved. How did they develop those weapons so quickly? His tactical advisor asked, reviewing the technical analysis reports. That is not the right question, Zecht replied grimly. The right question is, what weapons are they developing right now to counter our capabilities? Similar conversations were taking place across dozens of worlds. Species that had viewed humans as primitive newcomers suddenly found themselves reassessing everything they thought they knew about Earth's military potential. Aboard the UES Defiance, War Commander Vexthon sat in the ship's detention facility, staring at the bulkhead and trying to understand what had happened to his fleet. Captain Vasquez had been true to her word about treatment according to galactic conventions. His wounded crew members had received excellent medical care, and all prisoners were being treated with professional courtesy. But Vexthon was not concerned about his physical condition. He was struggling to process the psychological impact of his complete defeat. In his 30 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy that seemed to understand Zephyrian tactics better than the Zephyrians themselves. Captain Vasquez visited him personally, something that surprised him. Most victorious commanders would delegate such meetings to subordinates. "I wanted to explain something to you," she said, settling into the chair across from his cell. "You asked how we predicted your every move. The answer is simpler than you might think." "Enlighten me," Vexthon replied, genuinely curious despite his circumstances. "Humans approach warfare differently than most species," Vasquez began. "We do not simply fight wars, we study them. Every battle is an experiment. Every engagement is a learning opportunity. Every defeat is a chance to improve our methods." She activated a holographic display showing detailed recordings of previous Zephyrian raids. "We analyzed 47 separate engagements involving your fleet. We studied your communication patterns, your tactical preferences, your response times to different threats. We built computer models that could predict your behavior with 93% accuracy." Vexthon watched the recordings in fascination and horror. The humans had documented every move his fleet had made, categorizing and analyzing their actions like scientists studying animal behavior. "But why allow us to continue raiding for so long?" he asked. "You could have stopped us months ago." "We needed data," Vasquez replied matter-of-factly. "Each raid provided new information about Zephyrian capabilities and tactics. We deliberately allowed some attacks to succeed, so we could observe your full range of behaviors under different conditions." The cold calculation behind this statement was staggering. The humans had sacrificed their own people and resources to gather intelligence, treating lives and ships as acceptable losses in pursuit of greater strategic knowledge. "Your species terrifies me," Vexthon admitted. "Not because of your weapons, but because of how you think. War Commander, humans do not fight emotional wars. We fight scientific wars. We analyze problems, develop solutions, test hypotheses, and iterate improvements. What you experienced today was not a battle. It was the final examination after months of study." Vasquez stood to leave but paused at the cell door. "Your species made the mistake of thinking that humans fight the same way you do. We do not. When someone threatens our colonies, we do not just fight back. We solve the problem permanently." After she left, Vexthon sat in silence for hours, contemplating her words. The humans had not just defeated his fleet, they had made it impossible for any Zephyrian force to use the same tactics again. Every weapon, every maneuver, every strategic approach his people had developed was now obsolete. Meanwhile, in the command center of the Retribution, Captain Vasquez was already thinking about the next phase of human expansion. The Zephyrian threat had been eliminated, but there were other species in the galaxy that might need similar education. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving intelligence reports about Corvan raiders operating near the Centauri colonies." "Excellent," Vasquez replied, pulling up the preliminary data. "Begin analysis of their attack patterns immediately. I want full behavioral profiles within 2 weeks." The tactical officer nodded and began organizing the intelligence teams. The process would begin again: observation, analysis, solution development, and implementation. It was the human way of war, and it had proven devastatingly effective. Across the galaxy, military commanders were beginning to understand a fundamental truth about humanity. They were not just another spacefaring species with advanced technology. They were something new and terrifying, a species that had applied the scientific method to warfare itself. On Earth, in the halls of Fleet Command, Admiral Chen reviewed the after-action reports from the Helix Nebula engagement. The operation had been a complete success, achieving all objectives with 0 casualties and providing valuable field testing for several experimental weapon systems. "What's our next priority?" her aide asked. "Integration," Chen replied. "We need to analyze how other species are responding to news of the engagement. Some will be deterred, but others might view it as a challenge. We need to be ready for both reactions." The aide made notes as she continued. "Also begin development of countermeasures for Corvan tactics. Intelligence suggests they favor hit-and-run attacks using small, fast ships. We'll need different solutions than what we used against the Zephyrians." This was the true strength of human military doctrine, the ability to continuously adapt and evolve. Each enemy taught them something new, and each lesson made them more formidable against future threats. The galaxy was slowly learning that humanity's greatest weapon was not any particular technology or tactic. It was their approach to problem-solving itself. When humans encountered a military challenge, they did not just try to overpower it, they studied it, understood it, and then created specific solutions designed to make that challenge irrelevant. Species that had dominated their regions of space for centuries were quietly reconsidering their expansion plans. The newcomers from Earth had demonstrated something that veteran galactic powers found deeply unsettling: the ability to rapidly develop overwhelming responses to any military threat. The message was clear to anyone willing to listen. Humans did not just fight wars, they solved them. In the years that followed, the Helix Nebula incident became required study at military academies across the galaxy, not because of the tactics used or the weapons deployed, but because it demonstrated a new paradigm in interstellar warfare. The age of humans had begun, and it would be defined not by conquest, but by the terrifying efficiency with which they could analyze, adapt, and overcome any challenge the galaxy could present. War Commander Vexithan, eventually released as part of a prisoner exchange, would spend the rest of his career teaching young Zephyrian officers about the dangers of underestimating humanity. His most important lesson was simple: when humans say they want to learn about you, it means you have already lost.